Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 60 of the Ventures podcast. In this show, we talk a lot about the different aspects of how to build a company, how to think about the processes of building a team, building a product, going to market, selling that product. And one thing that we talk about a fair amount is market, how to choose a market. And I think basically by nature of being an entrepreneur, you tend to have rose-colored glasses on when approaching a market. You tend to think that your idea, the product that you're building, is going to be received extremely well by the people that you think are going to be using it or buying it. And so in this episode, I pull a clip from episode 33 with Bill Murphy and Saul Cates, where we talk about how to essentially be aware of and potentially take off those rose-colored glasses when approaching a market, how to think about asking the right questions and really understand your customers so that you can, especially if you're selling software into companies, you can save a significant amount of time with your efforts in order to optimize the progress of your startup. So if you're listening to this podcast, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there you'll see more extensive show notes to the topics that we talk about in this clip. And if you're watching, you can also listen to this episode anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this clip with Bill Murphy and Saul Cates from episode 33.
Looking at industry, period. Like if it's a large conglomerate, if it's a particular market, if it's a vertical, or if it's a startup with an idea, understanding the problem and then what validating that problem is important to solve is so damn critical, right? How many technologies have been hunting down for their use case, right? You said it earlier, you can never get customer one, because they don't understand what the customer needs, right? Or the widget they have is the wrong time, wrong thing, right? There's so many examples of that. I've done my startup due diligence and I've done my startup failures where we've gone through and missed something. And the thing that was always a big miss was customer understanding, right? Getting customer validation soon. And you said earlier, like the loss statement. Yeah. Fail fast, fail your idea, figure out why it ain't happened. So I think my journey to it is I've been on both sides of the fence quite a few times, and I've learned from a lot of people, and I try to find other people that can say these words, not just me. But I think Bill understands, and probably you do too, well, that there's a bridge into experts of understanding customers, and that's where I met Cresting Wave some years ago. We had a technology at a company I was working with, and we were trying to hunt down our first couple customers, and we sort of knew our widget, we sort of knew our story, and we could tell that story, but it turned out that there wasn't a lot of synergies with the buyers at the time outside of some high-end hedge funds and people like that are on the super spectrum of extreme, right? That's not your normal market, right? It's like there's a handful of those that are going to do that, and you get installed with them. That was a great learning experience because there's also this whole world of just a couple customers. I didn't know that, right? There are worlds like that are huge. So it's interesting. I have a more deeper appreciation now than I did before, and I don't know, Bill, if you wanted to comment on it. There is sort of like the general market. There's those little tiny supermarkets, right, that are like just so niche, but wow, you can retire on that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Because there is a spectrum out there that's just so extreme sometimes.
Sure, and I think it's been interesting. I've been thinking a lot about this because the whole broad versus specialized, and I do think that that often people get like a couple of big customers or like really engaged people can throw these companies off the scent too, right? Where you're making an assumption that there's a couple of hedge funds that buy so much data, and they'll spend anything to try to find new ideas, right? And I've met tons of these companies that are like, oh, we have new data, And, we've projected the market at $400 million. And you're like, why? And they're like, well, they took what those two hedge funds would spend, and then they multiplied it by the number of hedge funds. And and they were like, look at all this market. So
Yeah.
I guess making sure that you're not attacking a market with rose-colored glasses is the number one learning.
For
And
happy
then,
ears.
right, yeah, people, all they want to do is hear that it's great. The number of times when folks have come out like, oh, they said they love my product, and it's like they just don't want to insult you to your face. Like they clearly are not going to do anything. Like, I mean, it was like, but you're in the same meeting and you're hearing it one way and they're hearing it the way that they want to hear it. So like, just like super honesty with yourself as a founder, and then I'd say the curiosity to be searching for opportunities deeply. I do think that like the world is like bordering on like over optimization, where everyone's like, if I don't get an immediate yes, move on. Don't get an immediate yes, move on. And like there's this belief in like the law of large numbers, but I actually don't think the numbers are as large as people. Maybe if you're like advertising on Facebook, the numbers are large because there's billions of people. But for the people who are selling to, CTOs, there aren't that many. There are a decent number, but like it's not crazy. So instead of just saying, Bill said no, let's go to Joe. Joe said no, let's go to Mary, and then expecting a different outcome, it's like a lot of questioning of why is the no. And that's what we're trying to bring, is an intimacy with our community that can enable like those real honest dialogues instead of the, glad handing or just sort of like surface level conversations that often kind of can give you the wrong signal. And we go on every meeting with our clients and sort of facilitate that deepening of that dialogue. We're not just like setting up a meeting and leaving. We're right there with you, co-piloting your sales process as an innovative young company. And I think our tech leaders who are in our community appreciate that as well, because they know they've got an advocate for their needs. And we're only going to bring them something that we think meets their needs based upon our knowledge, right? We're not going to bring an AWS spend optimization to somebody who uses GCP, right? But that happens all the time. I used to get approached by these like business broker lead gen type of people at Blackstone, and everyone thinks Blackstone's this huge company. It's really, it's big in terms of impact, small in terms of number of people, right. And we didn't have the legacy debt. I remember I probably had 10 people come in try to sell me mainframe conversion technology, and mainframe
doesn't exist here,
right? So like that wastes time for technology leaders. It creates, exhaustion for new things. So we're trying to prevent that and then create deeper dialogue so that everybody kind of gets a better understanding. And oftentimes, if you really, if you double click a few times in these conversations, you can get to the heart of a problem that either the solution can address or, the next rev of the solution can address.
Right.
But it really comes down to like good questioning and really understanding the customer as you're talking to them, or at least seeking to understand. And it's fine to ask questions once you've showed them the basics of what you're trying to solve, and then getting their reaction to your product, and then diving in on where the gaps could be that your product could fill.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, There, you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it'd be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.